Hello, everybody. Hi. Hello from New York City.
Yeah, nice to see you.
You too, Michael. Great to see you.
Yep, so let's get started. It's a huge honor and super grateful to have Breanne here today. She's um, the co-founder of one of the most inspiring movements, the Women's March. Love to hear her story, how she got started, how she's really stood up for the rights and the like shown such leadership. So if please put your hands together for Breanne, and thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for that lovely intro. So great to be on this call with you all. I just realized that this is my first time speaking to a global audience this year. So I'm very excited about that, especially given everything that's happened the last 6 months. I'm going to go ahead and rewind a little bit to about 2016, 2017, just to kind of introduce a little bit of where I was when I really made the shift to understanding the power of decentralized movements and a little bit about my story. So originally, I'm from Detroit, Michigan. I moved to New York City in 2011 to pursue my career as a chef. I've been cooking as a chef since I was 16 years old. It's been something that has always been stable for me, no matter what phase in my life I've been in. But, I don't know if any of you all have worked in the food industry or know somebody that does. Chances are you do, because we find that about 50% of folks have some proximity to somebody in the food industry globally. It's such a huge thing. So I am a product of that for sure. And I decided to move to New York to pursue that professionally, working in Michelin star restaurants, helping to open the Facebook New York kitchens. And I understood that there were so many inequities, even within the food industry, right? And I think that, again, going back to if any of you have worked in this industry or know somebody that has, it's no secret that the wages aren't great. There's not a lot of thanks, but it is a very nourishing job, quite literally, being able to feed people. But when it is such a big part of who you are too, and especially if it is something that you creatively enjoy, the trade-off is always worth it, right? But that being said, it can also be a breeding ground for discrimination, for harassment. And these are things that, quite honestly, I've been working on in the last year, particularly with the pandemic, helping to fight for equality for folks in the food industry, our service workers that haven't really stopped working since the last since shutdown, really. And I think I could say that globally, from understanding the situation and understanding the similarities. Everybody needs to eat, everybody needs food. And there's been various challenges we've all been facing, no matter where we're located. But putting a pin in that conversation and going back to just being in an industry that really showed a lot of inequities. And especially for me, being a young woman at the time, I was just 22 years old. And it was a lot to deal with on top of already a stressful environment. That being said, I ended up walking away from working in restaurants because of being harassed and discriminated against from my male colleagues. I honestly just had enough. And I decided that I wanted to just go freelance, not have to deal with all of the added layers of an already challenging environment. And when I went freelance, I decided to really put myself out there, trying to work with companies and brands I felt aligned with. And I was really shocked when I was asked to do cookies, because I was doing I was doing cookies at the time, like these special cookies that looked like iPhones. I was using edible ink to print out people's Instagram feeds. At the time, this was like 2018. So, you know, the iPhone still had the button. It still had like a different look that looked pretty cool on a cookie. But I ended up being asked to do cookies for Hillary Clinton's campaign for president at the time. It was really her and Donald Trump. And I really thought for sure that Hillary would win. And that was such a privileged outlook for me to even think that in my bubble that was going to be the reality. And I just want to back up and say I'm located in the United States. There's a very different political climate here, very different challenges, but it is part of my story in talking about global equity, because I realized what was happening here. And even for me, just a chef at the time, to be in a space where I saw firsthand how many people were being affected politically in 2016 with the confirmation of Donald Trump becoming president. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, like just straight up. That's what was going through my mind. And even understanding too, as a woman, you know, seeing that there was so much rhetoric around women's rights being challenged at that time. There still is, quite frankly. But, you know, it was no secret that in the campaign, that was one of the things that was definitely on the line. And so when I saw after the election, I saw online that there was a call for a march in Washington, D.C. And I knew right away, like, this is something that is tangible that I can do right away to just show my outrage, show my support to all of the groups that are putting themselves on the front lines to protect my rights as a woman, you know, to protect rights of disabled folks, LGBTQIA, the list goes on and on, immigrants, right? All of these things were happening very quickly. And I had told you earlier that I was the pastry chef at Facebook. And so I saw this march on Facebook, and the organizer at the time, Teresa Shook is her name. She's a grandmother in Hawaii that actually started the page to be able to march in DC with her granddaughters. And as we all know, the march wasn't very small. It ended up being, you know, just when I joined the page, it was less than 1,000 people that had RSVP'd. And very quickly, it started to circulate around the internet. And I had reached out and said, if there's anything I can do, of course, let me know. And of course, I'm thinking maybe something food related, but they had seen on Facebook that I had worked at Facebook and assumed I was an engineer or a coder or something, and decided, Teresa was just like, honestly, I'm overwhelmed. I'll be in DC, but like, I cannot manage this page. So if you want to help out, you can manage this page. And she assigned me as a host of the event page. And I tell you what, I felt like, is this what Beyonce feels like every time she posts? Because literally it was like, update the page. Here's the latest on the permit. Here's the latest on the location, what have you. And it was just, I would click refresh and it would be like thousands of comments, thousands of likes. So many people in real time were following the event page, and it became huge. Like I remember those 72 hours, those first 72 hours, and just being glued to my couch. And I really knew that this was something huge, like way bigger than me. I should say it confirmed this was way bigger than me. I knew right away it was, but it confirmed this was way bigger than me when I had somebody in Australia reach out and say, okay, two things. Are we sure the date is January 21st? Because we already bought 10 plane tickets to come to DC. So don't y'all be messing the date up, because this was really expensive for us. And second of all, we have a whole group of women, particularly Indigenous women in Australia, that want to have their own marches and aren't able to go, but want to be able to protect, their rights around land and make sure their voices are being heard locally and what have you. So, how can we make sure that we can set up a march as well? And it was just like, whoa. First of all, like, we got people from Australia that have really invested thousands of dollars already to show up in solidarity with us. And we already got locals in Australia that feel empowered by our message. And they also see the parallels around women's rights being on the line right now. And they want to also be able to advocate for themselves on the same day. Like, this is really powerful. And a couple hours later, somebody from London reached out, then somebody from Geneva reached out. And it was very obvious that this was going global very quickly, right? At the same time, we were having conversations in the US around ensuring that we had diverse voices represented, that we had figures that could, like, quite literally be the face of so many different communities, and making sure that they were heard, and had people directly impacted from those communities really being a voice and saying, here's what we are struggling with, and this is how we're going to be showing up for the march, and these are our demands. And it was one of the most beautiful things to watch come together in terms of intersectionality, even having Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined the term intersectionality, give us her blessing, and be able to work with civil rights leaders such as Elder Bernice King, such as Harry Belafonte, Gloria Steinem, Angela Davis, all advising us, and being in the room with some of these folks that I had just seen in history books or had heard about, but never in my wildest dreams think that I would be in a room with them talking about how their firsthand experience decades ago, particularly in terms of global organizing, what that looked like, and all of the advantages that we had with technology to be able to reach folks that they weren't able to reach. And quite frankly, like, I really am still processing that to this day, even 4 or 5 years later, because it was just such a powerful thing to really understand. And literally, Elder Bernice King, who, for some of you that might not know, is Dr. King's daughter, eldest daughter. And she got on a call with all of us organizers. At that time, we had everybody in all 50 states here in the United States on a call with Elder King, where she said, you all are picking up the baton of my father and his legacy, and ensuring that these conversations, particularly around financial equity, continue. And that is something that some of you may or may not know. Of course, Dr. King is very known for his narrative around civil rights and ensuring that there was racial equity. But it was actually when he started the Poor People's Campaign and started talking about financial equity, particularly uniting poor white folks in the South with Black folks that were having a lot of similar struggles with capitalism at the time, and uniting them around saying, we deserve healthcare, we deserve financial equity, we deserve, to be able to provide for our families. And, he was killed very shortly after. And it's always been a touchy subject when we start talking about capitalism, right? And, just going back to Women's March and the start of that global movement, it really just very quickly opened my eyes when I started to be in conversations with some of the marchers that were having, their actions in, all over the world, like literally every single continent. Even the scientists in Antarctica reached out and were like, we want to have a march to be able to protect the climate and our rights to be able to continue this research and not have it defunded because somebody might not believe in climate change and they don't think that money needs to be spent looking into the damage that we're doing and what we can do as a population to reverse that. There was people that were marching for clean water in Ethiopia. There were people that were marching for reproductive freedom in the UK. The list goes on. And it was just, again, so powerful to really be a midwife, I want to say, because by no means did I do this. By no means was I like, let me just call up all these people I know around the world and inspire them to march. Like, I did nothing. All I was just helping to really nurture what was happening. And that's the power of decentralized movements, which I do want to talk about a little bit more later. But, the Women's March, particularly January 21st, 2017, when we have on record about 6 million people marched. I personally believe it was closer to 7, being that there were so many people that didn't actually document their marches. I had people in Russia, people in China telling me they were having marches, but not registering them, that they were, going on neighborhood walks or meeting in people's basements and being able to have, these conversations around how they, as in their community, be able to, voice for their needs and how could they be a part of this moment that was happening to ensure that their voices were being heard. And it was such a cultural moment. I can say that, again, looking back, as I mentioned, I'm still processing so much, quite frankly, but I can see how we really helped shift a lot of the cultural discussions, particularly around decentralized movements globally in the United States. Very shortly after, there was the March for the Youth, and here in the United States around gun laws, ensuring that they had the right to be able to go to school safely without worrying about, being shot by somebody that, for whatever reason, felt the need to come into a school with a gun and endanger people's lives, teachers and students. We've seen the March for Science, which was really exciting to see that happen, and such a powerful message to, again, the importance of being able to protect research and folks doing research, even if it's not what we want to hear. Sometimes we got to understand that, yeah, like there's been mistakes that have been made, but we still have the power to be able to influence change. We don't have to just stay in the acceptance phase of this is where we're at. And it's very difficult. And, sometimes it can feel even a little bit depressing to think that we're in this moment and watching in real time the impact of the decisions that have been made decades, centuries ago, right? And in this moment to see, a lot of that catch up to us. But we still have so much power, right? And something that I've really been sitting with, and it's why I said I was very excited to be able to speak with you all today, because it's something I've been sitting with over the last year, really, in seeing, again, this pandemic just completely devastate us as a global society, and understanding now more than ever the power we have really to, quite frankly, break down our own borders, like with the power of technology and with the power of some of these tools that we have available to us. There's really no reason why, I can't feel the same pain that my sisters are feeling around the other side of the world because they're facing the same issues I am. And it might look a little bit different, you know, in terms of whatever the structure is in that country, or, you know, whatever the specific details are, but there's still so much global inequity that we're facing. And again, whether it's around racial rights, human rights, even access to financial equities and things that so many people around the world that are unbanked don't have access to. And there's even layers of privilege that we have to address as a global society, again, in terms of access to some of these technologies. And what can we do? Us on this call, what is our role in helping to ensure that we can create equity in these decentralized spaces?
Amazing. And what sort of advice would you give to someone who wants to, you know, be a part of an incredible movement like this, or someone who wants to, you know, start a movement? Like, what kind of things do you think are critical to get over the tipping point, to kind of get it to scale? Like,
Yes. Well, look, the first piece of advice I have to say is, if you're thinking about starting a movement, chances are somebody else already has or is doing some type of work around that. And it's so crucial to just be able to join forces, because this isn't about ego right now. Like, we got to get work done. This isn't about individualism. This is about community. This is about making sure that we are really helping to build upon systems that have, been trying to really flourish in a lot of these oppressive systems like capitalism we're in, right? And how can we make sure that we are finding diverse voices, communities that are being directly impacted by the issues, you know? And even if you are somebody that's directly impacted by an issue, how can you dig a little deeper and think, okay, you know, where are those intersects, right? Where maybe I'm being impacted, but maybe there's somebody that has a different situation that I am, where not only are they being impacted by race, but they're also being impacted by their sexual identity or their gender, or maybe it is, they come from a community that doesn't have the same financial resources that I might have. So what can I do to ensure that that education is being able to reach, communities that might already be doing a lot of the work that I'm thinking needs to be done, but I've got another piece of the puzzle that they might not have, right? I might have the piece of the puzzle that has the system and the infrastructure, and particularly, blockchain technology and all this cool stuff that I know so many of us on this call are really passionate about, rightfully so. And how can we make sure that communities that are doing the other piece of this work are able to get those tools? And now how can we come together and be able to really work off of, like, build off of the work that each is already doing, if that makes sense? And again, I just think it's so crucial for us, especially on this call, to understand the role that we have in this moment. Like I said, I've been stewing on this conversation really the last year, and I'll go on record today and say that I officially have more faith in the decentralized financial movement than I do in political parties right now. I truly believe that this is the key. And I can say this because the last few years, especially, I've been in the rooms, I've been in the spaces with the elected officials, with the people really doing a lot of work to see change. And the reality is we need to see change happen in ways that have to do with financial freedom. And I truly believe that when people have the resources and capital to be able to fund and build on the work that they've already been doing in their communities, and now they're able to actually bring that into the current state of where we're at with technology and blockchain and being able to access financial capital that you traditionally wouldn't be able to with fiat, right? So these are the things that get me really excited. I'm very passionate about ensuring that all of us that are part of such a huge cultural shift right now, like we all know, we all know that this is definitely the the future, right? It's no doubt about it. We have to make sure that we don't replicate the same oppressive systems, though, that have previously prohibited communities from being able to access the same levels of financial freedom, though, that current systems are benefiting, right? We need to make sure that as this decentralized financial movement continues globally, and as we continue to be able to educate folks on the power of this, we need to also make sure that we're including and centering voices of people being directly impacted by a lot of these oppressive systems and aren't able to access financial freedom.
Amazing. And how do you we have a question here from you. Could you elaborate on the intersection of blockchain technology, tokens, and financial equity? How tokens can really empower, projects to get funded, and money to move around borders and support people otherwise might not have the capital or the resources?
Yes, that's a great question. There's a lot of layers to this. I could honestly go on and on and on about this particular question. But right off the bat, I just keep thinking about the unbanked and the opportunity to be able to use this technology to help folks access like capital. I'm even like, just to be very transparent, I'm invested in some tokens and technologies that are working on this. One of them, I think I could say, I hope it's a safe space. I'm not trying to endorse anything, but Safe Moon is one of them. They're doing a lot of great work right now, being able to provide financial freedom to different countries, particularly in Africa. They're starting in the Gambia right now and being able to test this model where they can allow people in the Gambia to use Safe Moon as official currency, which is huge. We've also seen, I think it was Argentina that just, was it Argentina or was it Brazil? My bad. They adopted, El Salvador did, I know that, adopted cryptocurrency as like currency. Like we're starting to see, and it's exciting to me to be able to see countries that quite frankly are really behind the curveball when it comes to technology be upgraded, like go from like 0 to 100. I think that's very exciting. And we're going to see a lot of creators and artists and small business owners be able to now sell their products, be able to benefit from trade that they haven't been able to before. And that's like super exciting for me. Even here in New York, though, I was just reading this morning that the MTA here, the subway system where you swipe your Metro card to be able to access, we're going cashless completely. And that devastated me because there's like so many New Yorkers. I want to say it's like 20 something percent, but I don't quote me on that. The point is there's a lot of New Yorkers that don't have bank accounts. And it's a very privileged mindset to think like, oh, everybody can just whip out their smartphone and, scan it as they're going to use the Metro card, or they can whip out their debit card and just reload it. That's not the reality for a lot of people. Even in countries that do have a lot of financial capital, right, and financial privilege. So again, I just think about how this technology can really be a voice for people that don't have a voice right now when it comes to these financial systems. And that can mean a lot of different things, again, depending on what your community is, what you've had access to in the past, what you're passionate about. But there's a lot of power in being able to access these financial systems. And especially there's a lot of power in being able to find other people around the world that can also access these same things, and like what kind of bridges are being built as a result of that.
Amazing. And one really cool thing was how the Women's March used digital currencies and digital assets and tokens to fundraise. Like, love to hear your thoughts there on how, you know, movements like this and organizations can use digital assets or cryptocurrencies to fundraise, and why it worked for you guys like compared to credit cards or traditional fiat.
Yes, absolutely. This was another great thing that was really cool to be able to use. We were able to accept Bitcoin and Ethereum, which has really been great for the organization. You know, those donations definitely were able to flourish over the last couple of years, which is really helpful. But aside from that, you know, being able to be in spaces around the world and say, hey, would you like to donate? And, you know, be able to show the wallet and have folks be able to donate right on the spot. To be able to even think about the possibilities, right? I know that there's not a lot of global travel happening right now, but when that does happen, the possibilities of being able to say, hey, you know, we're going to have a fundraiser, or we're going to be able to raise funds in this country, because when, you know, this event happens over here, we can just transfer that very easily, or we can just very easily get those resources over. Especially when you think about the structure of like global chapters and, you know, being able to think beyond just like whatever that country's currency is. It's a lot easier to be able to move funds quickly, especially if something happens and people need funding quickly. We saw this in India. Like, there was a lot of really great COVID relief funds. I saw that people were sending Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies over, you know, to help with aid very quickly and bypass a lot of other systems. That is huge. Also too, I think the possibility of charity tokens is really big. There's one I'm invested in, Baby Shark token. It's just kind of fun, but it's about preserving the ocean too. And they're actually working in Indonesia with shark scientists and working with locals to be able to help fund ocean preservation and research in those areas. So, and that's just like one example, but you know, there's so many things. Like, I think of the possibilities for an issue like climate change that affects us all globally as a people, right? This is a conversation we all need to be having, and the possibilities of, wow, I can help make a difference over here in this country that's being impacted by climate change. I can help fund whatever efforts are happening on the ground a lot easier than having to go through like, oh, let's go through this organization and, you know, or have to move this and wonder, is the community really going to be able to get it? Are they really going to be able to see my donation, or are they only going to get like a small percentage by the time all the fees and what have you, you know, go through? So there's so many exciting things. And again, it's why I know all of you are on this call too, because you see a lot of the potential possibilities. And it's something that absolutely is crucial in being able to fund issues that are impacting us as a global species.
And I guess, you know, it would have been super cool if, you know, when the Women's March started, the first thing it could have been done alongside creating, you know, Facebook pages or groups is creating a token. And then the early supporters of it could buy a piece of it to support it financially. And then as the movement grows, you know, it has its like an economic system, and it has this network effects where, you know, more people are incentivized to get it to succeed, and then you create a parallel economy. Love to hear like your next steps. Like where's the Woman March going? Like how do you see the progress in terms of the rights for gender equity, and we're also teaming up on the Her token, which is an industry token for the woman token economy for the female representation. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes, absolutely. I'm actually really excited, and we'll have to talk a little more offline about Her token too, because this was something that I know in like 2018 we were talking about something like this happening, and it just never was able to really quite take off at that moment. But like, I'm so excited that it is now, because it's so needed, and I feel like people are a lot more open to these types of concepts. It was a lot harder in 2018 to be able to sell it, because people are like, what? Like, what is this? Isn't Bitcoin bad? Like, isn't that what people use to like hustle drugs? Like, what is this? You know, what is blockchain technology? And now people are a lot more open. And it's great that we've had a lot of cultural references this year, even, you know, with the Wall Street Bets movement and all these other things that you can use as reference points and say, like, you know, this was a really great moment that we saw people saying, you know what, I'm not benefiting from these systems, and these rich guys are just getting richer. Like, what can we do when we organize together to be able to take down some of these systems? And the best way to take them down is, you know, decentralization. And we know this, right? It's the same thing as, oh, it's one thing if, you know, there's an ant crawling on me, but if there's like, you know, 100,000 ants, I don't know why I just said that analogy. Like, now I'm like, oh. But the point is that's a lot different than, you know, just a few, right? Now it's a force, and even it's just one small thing individually, you put it all together, and it's a force that can't be ignored. You have to be able to address it, right? And so I think that being able to think about how these decentralized movements and the responsibility, quite frankly, in being able to tie that into these movements for equity and equality and, you know, everything that we've been seeing so many communities around the world really demand that their voices be heard around these issues. Like, how can we be able to use these systems and ensuring that those folks are also, A, getting educated on them, B, having their voices be heard when they're being created? You know, one thing I want to just flag for you all, because again, I know we're all in different spaces and this stuff is happening in real time. It's like the wild, wild west right now. It's really exciting. And there's a lot of responsibility that comes along with it, because these things are very hard to reverse once society adopts and accepts a concept. It's very hard to now be like, oh, but now we're going to like talk about diversity and make sure it's not just white men in here. Like, you know how hard it is to have to reverse those systems? Whereas now we have the power to be able to make sure that when somebody is talking about, you know, the next thing or the next decentralized whatever, ask yourself some questions. Like, first of all, who's having these conversations? Whose voices are being represented right now? And if there's voices not being represented, how can we make sure that they are being represented as a next step? Does that mean I'm making an introduction to somebody I know? Does that mean that I'm maybe saying something to the organizers and asking them questions and saying, hey, I noticed you don't have any women speaking. And I think that it would be really helpful if we had a woman being able to use their point of view in helping shape some of these systems as they're being created. I think it would be helpful if we had somebody that maybe had a mental disability to be able to say if something was accessible, or say if something was, the language was inclusive to their needs, right? We can't make sure that these systems are being made from the lens of people with various levels of privilege, and the reality is with decentralized movements, you're going to get people from all different backgrounds, right? I might not have privilege when it comes to my gender, but I have privilege, I'll say, when it comes to like where I live. Like, I live in New York City, I'm in a progressive area. Like, what does that mean? I have access to people and networks that other people might not have, right? And that's just me. Everybody has their own story. Everybody has their own struggles. Everybody has their own reason for really being attracted to this space right now, and their own like solutions that they're seeing as a result of decentralized finance, decentralized movements, right? And now we got to zoom out and think, like, if this is truly going to be decentralized, how can we make sure that everybody is being heard, and that people that are most impacted to the issues are able to speak on them directly?
Amazing. Yeah, super amazing, inspiring and insightful, and excited to create this shift together. Love to hear maybe a final question. Really appreciate and great for your time. What's your vision and dream for the future? Like, what does, the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years look like when, your mission and vision is accomplished? Like, how would you describe that?
I am so in this movement right now, honestly. Like I just said on this call, like, I've officially accepted I have more faith in the decentralized financial movement than I do current political parties, period. And because I see that when people that haven't had the resources available to them, but they have the idea, they have the community, they have the vision, they know what needs to be done, they just don't have the resources to do it. And now all of a sudden, instead of having to rely on some charity to swoop in and save the day, or having to rely on a government a grant to come through, or having to rely on just using all their energy to try to fundraise an issue they care about, right? Now all of a sudden there's a way to look back and say, look at how much resources are being circulated every single second, right? And whether we're talking about digitally, like, it might not be equated to currency at the moment, but our data and like the value of that, right? Like, what does that look like? And how much value am I even every single day just by simply existing and logging onto the internet, or just by simply going and paying for my basic needs for that day, right? Like, how can we start to look at those systems and think, what is already circulating out here? And how can we start to pull back and, quite frankly, self-fund a lot of the things, or help to move resources to people that aren't able to get them traditionally? And I think about the possibilities of, like I was saying, even just with that one, the one token I'm invested in, where it's a charity token around shark conservation and the oceans, and like what that means in that particular part of Indonesia, and where there's such a high concentration of sharks. And when the concentration of sharks is getting less and less every single year because of climate change, and thinking about what that does to the ecosystems, right? Somebody in America, for instance, like me, might be thinking, oh, the oceans are in trouble, what can I do to help? And of course, the most accessible way to help could be some big organization that everybody knows about. They got a lot of resources, they can pay for the Instagram ads and whatever. Or it's like, what about just this one little pocket, right? This one specific part of the ecosystem, right? How can I help these folks on the ground protect this little pocket, that if that's protected, this like has a much larger effect, right? And like, that's just one example example of one thing and one issue, right? And something so big such as climate change too has so many layers, and it means so many different things, whether we're talking about the ocean, whether we're talking about forest fires, whether we're talking about desert and access to clean water, the list goes on and on. And so I just think about, again, the people in those communities that are actually doing work on the ground, understand the issues, have seen the evolution of the last 10, 20 years, and know what needs to be done. And how can we get them the access? And what happens when we do give them the access to those resources? And what kind of change are we seeing now that is coming from quite literally the ground up? Instead of, oh, this government gets this money and now they're gonna tell us where it goes, or they're gonna be able to move it to the organizations that donate to them. And like, there's a lot of muddy waters. And you know what, I know every country's different, and some people might be really blessed to have a leader that really cares about issues and is doing the right thing when it comes to distributing those resources. But quite frankly, I have seen how the sausage is made, and I'm just like, I don't think we have time for that. I think we need to make sure that we are finding the folks doing the work and moving those resources to them. And that's what gets me excited, thinking about where we could be in 5, 10 years when we start to make those moves, because now all of a sudden we're seeing a true grassroots movement happen globally, where people are able to feel empowered in their communities, their voices are being heard, and they'll be able to actually, you know, have the resources to prove their point and show results. And that is like the medicine we need right now as a global people.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Breanne. Super insightful and inspiring, and really excited for the change and shift in society and humanity and the financial system that we're creating together.
Yes.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you again. We're just opening up the breakout rooms for the last few minutes.